What if the world is standing at a moment where one small move could decide peace, or something far more dangerous? What if the signals are already there, but most people are not paying attention? Right now, behind official statements and calm headlines, a different story may be unfolding, a story where trust is fading, tensions are rising, and decisions are being made quietly. The real question is, are we looking at the last chance for peace, without even realizing it? In recent days, a new wave of discussion has started spreading across global media and online platforms. It is not just another news update, it carries a tone of urgency, a feeling that something important is shifting. The kind of shift that does not happen suddenly, but builds slowly, step by step, until one moment changes everything. At the center of this growing attention is a simple but powerful idea, the possibility that peace may not be as stable as it seems. For a long time, the global situation between major powers has been tense but controlled. There have been disagreements, warnings, and strong statements, but also efforts to maintain balance. Ceasefires, negotiations, and diplomatic talks have acted like a thin line holding everything together. That line may not be strong, but it has been enough. Until now. Now that balance appears to be under pressure, one of the key concerns being discussed is the timing. A temporary ceasefire, something that was meant to create space for dialogue, is slowly reaching its end. Normally, such moments are handled with careful communication and renewed efforts to avoid conflict. But this time, the signals are different. Instead of calm reassurances, there are hints of stronger positions and growing mistrust. This is where things start to feel uncertain. Reports and narratives circulating online suggest that behind the scenes, military readiness may be increasing. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, calculated manner. Movements, positioning, and planning that may not be openly confirmed, but are being noticed and discussed. And in global politics, such signals matter. Because when countries begin preparing, even quietly, it often means they are considering possibilities beyond diplomacy. It does not always lead to conflict, but it always raises the risk. At the same time, public statements from influential figures are adding more weight to the situation. When someone like Donald Trump makes a claim or shares an opinion, it spreads quickly and shapes how people see events. Similarly, any connection to leadership figures like Xi Jinping brings in a larger global context. This is no longer just about one country or one decision. It becomes a story involving multiple powers, each with their own interests, strategies, and concerns. And when these interests begin to clash, even indirectly, the situation becomes harder to control. Another important element in this growing tension is perception. In today's world, what people believe is happening can be just as powerful as what is actually happening. Narratives spread fast. A single claim can create fear, raise questions, and influence public opinion across millions of people within hours. And right now, the narrative that is spreading is clear. Something is changing. Whether it is a real shift in strategy or simply a strong reaction to uncertain events, the effect is the same. People are starting to ask questions. Analysts are watching closely. And the idea that peace might be at risk is becoming more common in discussions. This is how major moments often begin, not with a sudden event, but with a growing feeling that something is not right, a feeling that the situation is moving in a new direction. And perhaps the most important part is this. No one has a complete picture yet. There are claims, there are responses, and there are interpretations. But there's also a lot that remains unclear. This uncertainty creates space for speculation, and speculation often increases tension even further. So now we are left with a critical situation. A ceasefire nearing its end. Rising discussions about military signals. Powerful voices making strong claims. And a global audience trying to understand what it all means. All of these elements together create one central question. Are we watching a normal phase of political tension? Or the early signs of something much bigger? Because if this truly is a turning point, then the decisions made in the coming days could shape what happens next. Peace could continue, but only if trust is rebuilt, or things could shift in a direction that is much harder to control. And the truth is, we may not realize which path is being chosen until it is already happening. It didn't start with an official announcement. There was no press conference, no confirmed report, no clear timeline. Instead, it began the way many modern global stories begin, through a claim that spread quickly, raising more questions than answers. According to a circulating narrative, a major moment may have taken place quietly at sea. A claim suggesting that U.S. forces intercepted a vessel believed to be carrying military-related equipment, allegedly heading toward Iran. Now, on its own, this kind of report is serious, but not entirely unusual in global security operations. What made this different was the timing, and the people connected to the story. The claim was linked to statements attributed to Donald Trump, and because of that, it didn't remain just a small discussion. It quickly turned into a widely shared narrative, picked up by different platforms, each adding its own interpretation. But the real tension didn't come from the interception itself. It came from what it might represent. Because if such an action did take place, it could suggest something deeper, something that goes beyond a single operation. It raises the idea that trust between major powers may not be as stable as it appears on the surface. And that is where Xi Jinping enters the picture. The narrative suggests that this alleged move contradicts earlier assurances, creating a sense that one side may not fully believe the other anymore. Whether that perception is accurate or not, it still matters, because in global politics, perception often drives reaction. If one country begins to feel that agreements are not being respected, even indirectly, it can change how it responds moving forward. And suddenly, a single incident becomes something much bigger. Now, let's step back for a moment. There is an important detail that cannot be ignored. None of this has been fully confirmed in a clear, official way. The story exists as a circulating narrative shaped by different voices, different interpretations, and different levels of information. But here's the reality. Stories like this don't need full confirmation to create impact. They influence how people think. They influence how analysts respond. And sometimes, they even influence how governments prepare. Because even the possibility of such an event can be enough to shift attention. And attention, in situations like this, leads to pressure. Pressure to respond, pressure to clarify, pressure to prepare. At the same time, the involvement of Iran adds another layer of complexity. This is not just a connection between two global powers. It brings in a region that has already experienced long-standing tension, strategic importance, and ongoing security concerns. So now, instead of a simple situation, we have a chain of connections, a claimed interception, a possible contradiction of trust, multiple countries with high stakes, and a global audience trying to understand what is real and what is not. This is how uncertainty grows. Not from one clear event, but from many unclear signals coming together at the same time. And as these signals spread, they start forming a pattern that suggests caution, a pattern that hints at preparation, a pattern that makes people wonder if something is building behind the scenes. But here's where things become even more interesting. There are two ways to look at this situation. The first is simple. This is just another exaggerated narrative, shaped by online discussion, where small pieces of information are turned into something bigger than they actually are. The second is more serious. This could be an early sign of a shift, a moment where actions are being taken quietly while public messaging remains controlled. And right now, it is not easy to say which one is true, because both possibilities exist at the same time. This is what makes the situation so difficult to read. There is no clear confirmation, no full denial, no complete transparency, only fragments of information, moving quickly across the world. And in that space between what is known and what is assumed, tension begins to grow. Because when people don't have clear answers, they start preparing for the worst. And when countries start thinking that way, even slightly, it changes everything. So the real question is not just whether this incident happened exactly as described. The real question is what happens next? Will there be clarification? Will there be silence? Or will there be a response that signals something more serious? Because if this narrative continues to grow without being addressed clearly, it could push the situation into a new phase, one where actions matter more than words. And that is where the risk increases. Not because of one event, but because of what that event might represent. Shifts like this don't arrive with a warning. They reveal themselves in patterns. No loud announcement, no clear line being crossed. Just small changes that slowly begin to point in a new direction. Right now, that direction is starting to look less like diplomacy and more like preparation. What makes this moment different is not just the incident being discussed, but the timing around it. A temporary ceasefire, which once acted like a pause button, is now approaching its limit. Instead of strong signals that it will continue, there are growing hints that things may not move in that direction. In global politics, silence can sometimes say more than words. When leaders choose not to clearly extend calm or reduce tension, it creates a gap, and that gap is quickly filled by speculation, analysis, and concern. People begin to look for other signs, subtle indicators that reveal what might be happening behind closed doors, and those signs are starting to appear. Discussions about military readiness are becoming more common, not direct confirmations, but indirect signals, movements, positioning, and increased attention in strategic areas. These are the kinds of actions that don't always mean conflict is coming, but they do suggest that the possibility is being taken seriously. And when multiple sides begin thinking in terms of what if, the situation naturally becomes more unstable. This is where the shift becomes visible, because diplomacy works on trust, and preparation works on doubt. The moment doubt starts to grow, even slightly, countries begin to act differently. They become more cautious, more defensive, more focused on securing their position rather than maintaining relationships. That change in mindset is powerful. It doesn't require a major event to trigger it. Sometimes all it takes is a series of unclear signals, like the ones being discussed right now. And once that mindset begins to spread, it becomes difficult to reverse. At the same time, there's another factor influencing this shift, the role of narrative. In today's connected world, information travels fast, but it doesn't always travel clearly. Stories are shared, repeated, reshaped, and sometimes amplified beyond their original form. And as they spread, they begin to shape perception. Right now, the dominant perception is simple. Tension is rising. Whether that perception is fully accurate or not becomes almost secondary, because once people believe that things are getting worse, they start reacting to that belief. Governments monitor public opinion. Analysts track trends. Decision makers pay attention to how situations are being viewed globally. And if the overall tone starts to feel unstable, it can influence real-world decisions. This is how narratives can quietly become reality. Not because they are confirmed, but because they are believed. Now, let's consider another possibility. What if this shift is not accidental? What if the signals being noticed are part of a controlled strategy? In global politics, not every move is meant to be fully understood. Sometimes actions are taken specifically to send a message, without saying it directly. A message of strength, a message of readiness, a message that says, we are prepared if needed. These kinds of signals are not always about starting conflict. In many cases, they are meant to prevent it by showing that one side is not weak. But the challenge is that both sides may be sending similar signals at the same time. And when that happens, the situation becomes more complex, because each side sees the other's actions as a reason to respond. This creates a cycle. One move leads to another, one signal triggers a reaction. And slowly, the space for calm discussion begins to shrink. This is where the real risk lies, not in one big decision, but in many small decisions that build on each other. And as this cycle continues, the idea of extending peace becomes more difficult. Because extending peace requires confidence. And right now, confidence seems uncertain. The approaching end of the ceasefire adds even more pressure to this situation. It creates a deadline, a moment where choices must be made. Either the pause continues, or the situation moves into a new phase. And if the signals we are seeing are accurate, that new phase may not look the same as before. It may involve stronger positions, more visible readiness, and less willingness to rely on trust alone. But even now, nothing is fully confirmed. There is still space for diplomacy, still time for clarification, still a chance for the situation to stabilize. That is what makes this moment so important, because it sits right between two possibilities. One where tensions calm down and cooperation continues, and another where the shift becomes permanent, leading to a more uncertain and unpredictable path. And the truth is, we may not know which direction is being chosen until it becomes impossible to change it. Zoom out for a moment, and the situation starts to look very different. And this is no longer just about one claim, one incident, or one moment of tension. What we are seeing now has the potential to affect something much larger: the balance between major powers, the stability of regions, and the direction the world could move in next. Because when countries like the United States, China, and Iran are part of the same narrative, even indirectly, the impact is never limited. It spreads. First, it affects global confidence. Markets react, investors become cautious, and uncertainty starts to influence economic decisions. Even the idea of rising tension can slow down cooperation in trade, technology, and international projects. Then, it affects alliances. Countries that are connected through partnerships begin to watch closely. They don't always act immediately, but they prepare. They reassess their positions, their strategies, and their level of involvement. Because in a situation like this, staying neutral becomes harder over time. And then, there's the most serious layer, the possibility of escalation. Not immediate, not guaranteed, but possible. And that possibility is enough to change how decisions are made. Right now, there are three broad paths this situation could take. The first path is stabilization. In this scenario, the current tension slows down. Clarifications are made, communication improves. The ceasefire, even if not officially extended, is replaced by some form of controlled understanding. This path requires effort, patience, and most importantly, trust. But at this moment, trust seems fragile. The second path is controlled tension. Here, things do not collapse, but they also do not fully improve. Signals of strength continue. Military readiness stays high. Public messaging remains careful but firm. This creates a long-term situation where peace exists, but under pressure, a kind of balance that is always at risk. And then there is the third path, unexpected escalation. Not necessarily because one side wants it, but because of miscalculation, misunderstanding, or reaction. This is often how larger conflicts begin, not with clear intent, but with a chain of decisions that slowly move beyond control. And this is where uncertainty becomes dangerous, because no one can predict exactly how each side will interpret the other's actions. A signal meant as a warning could be seen as a threat, a defensive move, could be taken as preparation for something more. And once those interpretations begin to clash, reversing the situation becomes extremely difficult. That is why this moment matters so much, not because everything is already decided, but because everything is still open. There is still time for clarity, still space for dialogue, still a chance for things to move back towards stability. But at the same time, the signals being discussed suggest that the window for easy solutions may be closing. And that brings us back to the central idea. Is this truly the last chance for peace? Or is it just another phase in a long cycle of global tension? The answer is not clear yet, because what we are seeing is not a complete picture. It is a mix of facts, claims, reactions, and narratives all moving at the same time. And in that mix, it becomes difficult to separate what is confirmed from what is assumed. But even without full clarity, one thing is certain. Moments like this do not stay uncertain forever. They move in one direction or another. And when they do, the effects are often felt far beyond the original situation. So now, the world is watching, waiting for signals to become decisions, waiting for uncertainty to become clarity, waiting to see which path will be chosen. Because if this truly is a turning point, then what comes next will not just shape one region. It could shape the direction of global stability itself. And the real question is, are we witnessing the final warning signs of a shift, or the beginning of something that no one is fully prepared for?